I am the co-chair of the Portland Utility Board, and we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting, and we're holding it electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely or by phone, and the city has made it available to the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. PUB believes and acts on anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions within PUB. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that's targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. We speak up and speak out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of PUB, and we focus on the impacted individual or population, condemning conduct, but not people.
All right. I'm Amy Archer-Masters, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, the name of the person you are addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the host, PUB staff, myself, and the co-chair, Karen Williams. So please limit any chats to technical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us that you've been waiting to speak if you've not been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board during the conversation. The co-host may lower your hand once you've begun speaking to maintain the flow of conversation. During public comment periods, the public can raise their hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If connecting by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on when speaking. If desired, it is not required. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If you're connecting by phone, please press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. Public comment will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through the chat with myself or raise your hand during the comment period. It's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. As noted, this meeting is being recorded. I'll pass it back to you, Karen.
All right, thank you, Amy. Let's take a quick look at our agenda after our usual disclosure of communications and seeing if there's any public comment, taking a quick look at the minutes, and we will dive into two really important documents, and the first of which is our annual review of our bylaws, and perhaps even more particular, looking at the beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles statement that is incorporated within our bylaws. We're required to review that every year, and looking forward to people's thoughts and questions about that, and if there are any changes that they would recommend that we make and adopt to those documents. And then second, we're going to be taking a look at our annual work plan draft and forward-looking work plan, our annual report draft, and then forward-looking work plan for the next year. And Amy's been working really hard on incorporating some thoughts and comments that you all have sent on that. So we'll take a look at that today and maybe get pretty close to having a final document that we can finalize at our next meeting. And then hoping we have a little bit of time at the end for any announcements looking ahead to the next couple meetings, and in particular some reflections or questions or thoughts or anyone that was able to participate in the fantastic tour of the Columbia Boulevard treatment plant that we did a few weeks ago. Love to hear any reflections on that. So let's go ahead and get started and ask any board members if there are any communications that you have had with Bureau or city officials or staff that you would like to disclose at this time. Let's see, Lorraine, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I had a.
Oh, Lorraine, we can't quite hear you. Is your headset adjusted there?
Are you hearing me?
Yes, that's better.
Oh, sorry about that. I had a meeting yesterday with Portland Parks and Recreation. It's really with regard to collaboration between my agency and Portland Parks. They developed a equity a budget decision tool, and we just spoke about that. So it's not a conflict, but I'm just declaring that official interaction.
Thank you. Bob, please go ahead.
I had a meeting last week with Commissioner Rubio's staff about concerns about trees and where that's headed, and also the city's floodplain resilience plan, which is moving through the Planning Commission, but is BES is involved.
Thank you. And Joe.
I don't know how pertinent it is, but I wanted to make it clear anyways, because of the last meeting, conversations from the public came up about Gresham City Council, and I did want to make it known that I am related to one of the council members from Gresham. That's Janine Gladfelter. She's my aunt.
Oh, thank you. Very good. Let's move on and see if there is any public comment. I believe is next on our agenda. Is there anyone on the phone that would like to make a public comment? You can hit *9 to raise your hand or *6 to unmute.
This is Amy, and I've not received any requests for public comment in advance, so.
Having then no public comment, let us move on to a quick review of minutes. And again, this is the field trip on July 26th. And thank you, Amy, for composing that cute little video that you made. That was a very nice documentation. And our August 2nd meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago. Are there any changes or additions or corrections that anyone would like to make to either of those sets of minutes? Seeing none and hearing no suggestions for corrections, those minutes will both stand as presented. Thank you very much, Amy, for pulling those together. All right, so let's dive into business then. Just a bit of background on the bylaws and the value statement that was presented in read ahead material. So as I mentioned, that it is in our bylaws that we review these documents every year and just make sure that they are still good guiding documents for our work. And in over a period of many months, 2019 through 2021, PUB did a very thorough review of our bylaws and made some important and needed updates and changes to those bylaws. So they've We had the good fortune of one of our pub members being particularly well positioned as an attorney to be able to really lead that work. So that thanks goes to Karen White Spencer for the most guiding the most recent review of our bylaws. And so they've had a pretty thorough look, just as a matter of background. And the amendments that came out of that review, it took a while to have those approved by City Council in December of last year. And we also amended our beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles statement in February of this year. I won't say minor, but made some changes to those statements. So with that, I would just invite any questions, particularly from new members or anyone about the bylaws, the values statement, and if you're comfortable adopting these as presented to guide us over the next year, then a motion would be in order to that account. But let me first just open the floor to any reflections or questions that people have on those or thoughts about them. Lorraine, please go ahead.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Is it positioned correctly? Wonderful. So my question is probably related to the bylaws, but overall, and I suppose this is probably at another time, overall conversation regarding what impact we can actually have, right? As our role as mandated by, whatever powers that has been vested in us or not. Especially since I was reading the article, I think it was last week, on one of the a similar body to ours that have been disbanded or something like that, because people were kind of confused about really what's the role kind of thing. And so I think that is more uppermost in my mind about what real impact we have based on what we can actually do or have that power to do or otherwise, and also the historical creation of this committee and how it was created, and the kind of what they did, what this group has done in the past, and if that power has been diminished, or when I'm not power is not the word, but influence has diminished or increased or whatever. I think that is more uppermost on my mind. Understand that, and the reason why I'm saying that is because it's very challenging to me to be part of.
Lorraine, you're starting to fade a little bit again there.
Am I fading?
Yeah, you were fading about at the
as I'm
beginning
moving
of
my
your last
head.
sentence.
Yeah, I'm very animated when I talk, because I'm very challenged to be part of any group where it seems that we're swaying into the realms of rubber stamping things. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you very much, Lorraine, for that reflection and those thoughts and challenges to us to think about those aspects of our work. Thank you. Tom, please go ahead.
Well, first, I wanted to say, unfortunately, Lorraine, I wasn't able to understand about half of what you said because of your the equipment not working right. But I think I got the gist of it, and I agree. I just wanted to clarify with Amy or anybody that knows this for sure. Bullet number 4 says, per bylaws, pub must review and adopt beliefs, etc. So the people that wrote the bylaws originally put in the bylaws that we would review and adopt these things every year. So does that mean that specifically in the city code, it doesn't require an annual review of the bylaws, or and does the city code require that pub create bylaws? So if Amy or Karen or somebody might know the answer to that, or if you don't, we could find out later.
That's
I
okay.
think, yeah, I think Amy is better suited to provide the context or the answer to those two questions.
Yeah, there are some requirements in the code. I would have to go back and pull out specific language about what type of review is required. And there is opportunity for annual review. The review that was just done, it just took place this year, and so it has not happened every year. I mean, you're required to take a look at your governing documents. It doesn't require that you make changes to them. So that's part of why we send all those documents out and make sure that you're taking a look at them and flagging any issues. And then we keep track as staff of any issues that have been raised as some potential future changes. I have one minor one on a list that doesn't rise to the level of needing to make a change, move it forward right now. But if there's a change in a future year, it's on a list. So we can also just keep track of those potential future changes. And at some point in the future, when there's enough of those things that it warrants going back before council, then we would potentially go back with, if there were code changes required and or bylaw changes, that we could move that forward. The bylaws does require the review of the beliefs, values, and racist principles, just so that you're at least making sure that you're reviewing and either readopting the existing values or making amendments to those and adopting that. So that is more explicit, that it take place as soon as possible after the first of the fiscal year. So that's this meeting. After new board members come on, you want to make sure that new board members are also brought up to speed on those values and principles, and that you're all in agreement, and any new ideas are also incorporated. And if people want that document pulled up, I have some of it on the screen that I can pull up, or we can pull up the full document.
What I was getting at is that with regard to that bullet point where it says per, if you could go back to it, please, it says per bylaws. So since the pub members wrote the bylaws, the pub members could actually change that. In other words, it says per bylaws. It's not per code, it's per the bylaws. So any particular new pub group could change that requirement that these be looked at annually or whatever. I mean, I'm not trying to propose anything. I just want to make sure I understand that this is that the previous pub members decided that this should be done annually. It's not in the city code that we have to do it annually.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
It's in the bylaws. So the pub could propose a change to the bylaws, and then that just needs to be approved by the mayor's office. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? And yeah, thanks, Amy, for sharing what the statement is that we are referring to for review and adoption. And again, if there are no further questions, then a motion to adopt the pub beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles would be in order.
I move that we adopt the set of values and bylaws. Sorry, I'm not sure I'm choosing these words correctly, but I move to do it.
Movement to adopt the pub beliefs, or I should say readopt the pub beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles. Thank you, Julia. Is there a second for that?
Seconded.
Sorry, who seconded that?
Chris Richard.
Chris. Okay, thank you. All right, is there any public comment on the item that pub is about to vote on? Seeing and hearing none, is there any further discussion among pub members on the motion before us?
I have just one thought, and that is with regarding the item number 1 of the values, etc. We've been talking about this issue of the Water Bureau shutting off water and the discussion about whether we agree with that. And I think I just wanted to point that out, that is something I think we're going to talk more about and perhaps come to a conclusion as to whether we would recommend that, whatever we might recommend. Anyway, so that's all. I'm in agreement.
Robin.
Yeah, I support our current statements with our anti-racist principles, and I just want to acknowledge that I have actually emailed the pub staff about wanting to go a step further with this, and as we're reflecting on our work plan and our year in review, discussing I brought up specifically, we have these anti-racist principles, but I have yet to experience an anti-racist training or be recommended anti-racist readings. And that way I actually know what I'm working with and how to move forward with it, and wanting to find a way for us as a board to be reading more up on this. And that way we actually know the background to our stated principles, and we have more than just principles, and that we're actually making choices, or just a way to be more educated with our anti-racist principles, and supporting that we have these values and really wanting to remain educated and steadfast about being knowledgeable. And that way I can really move with these principles and not just have them.
Thank you, Robin. Lorraine, please go ahead.
Thank you, Robin. And I'm going to hold my mic so you all are hearing me. So I was going to bring this up later, but I suppose this is an appropriate time, and I agree with Robin. And one thing I would like to suggest, I don't know if it's in the next iteration of this, is that I would like actually for us to say that clean and affordable drinking water is a human right. That's where I would sit on this. Being entitled to it and actually being a right is two different things. And I also was leading to where Robin was thinking, is that what is the common language understanding when we say center racial equity in all our decision making? And I think it speaks to what Bill mentioned, is that I think that we need to agree when we say that. What does that mean? What does that look like? How is that operationalized? How is that centered? That we be clear on that we are all speaking the same language, because it, you know, what racial equity mean to me and to someone else might be, you know, at varying ends of the spectrum. So I also want to support that we have common language as we move forward, and that we actually understand what it is we mean when we say we are centering racial equity.
And Lorraine, may I respond to your, thank you for that. And may I respond to your first item you mentioned, which was a suggestion that we add something like a statement that clean and affordable drinking water is a human right. Would you like, are you asking for us to add that to our value statement now? And if so, that would be in order at this time.
Oh, is it? Oh, yes, definitely. Now rather than later, definitely.
So I might suggest that that be offered as an amendment to the motion. The motion was to adopt the beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles that are on the screen before us, or rather to re-adopt them. So I might suggest that it would be most clear if you were to recommend an amendment to that motion to add the statement as you in the words that you choose to use.
I propose that we add that clean and affordable drinking water is a human right in our first belief. Is it? We believe, yeah, in our first belief statement.
I second that. This is Julia DeGraw.
So suggestion to amend the statement as read by Lorraine. Let's see, amendment, let's see, 2222 is seconded. I'm not entirely sure that that's required, but I think it's
Yeah,
good.
I just realized it may not be. I apologize. I don't know how this works
That's
either.
okay.
I'm just
No,
like very supportive of it.
No, exactly. And I think it's super, it's important because Julia, you made the motion. So to have your support for the amendment, I think is fantastic. So any discussion then on, and now this is the amendment. So this is discussion on adding the statement to that we believe that clean and affordable drinking water is a human right. Is there any discussion on adding that statement? And let's see, I apologize if I got hands order wrong, but I see Sarah's hand comes up first on my list. So let's go Sarah, then Alexis, then Kale.
I had a comment about something else. So circle back to me once this discussion is done.
Okay, sounds good. Alexis, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm very supportive of adding this and I have a clarifying question, and that might evolve into an amendment. Are we suggesting that we add a new bullet that reads clean and affordable drinking water is a human right? And then like the second bullet would say every person is entitled to clean and affordable drinking water. And if that is the case, I would suggest that we have this first belief statement read that every person is to kind of flip it, because healthy communities and healthy watersheds are also human rights to live in a healthy environment. And so I would like to make sure that we are encompassing all three of these aspects as human rights. And so that could say every person is entitled to drinking, healthy and clean and affordable drinking water, healthy communities and healthy watersheds, like as in recognition of their human rights, or something like that. I'm not good at coming up at wordsmithing on the fly, but my proposal is that we ensure that healthy communities and healthy watersheds and environments are also included as human rights.
Well, let me look to Lorraine as the maker of the amendment to add drinking water as a human right. Lorraine, how do you feel about expanding the amendment that you suggested, or the addition that you suggested, to also include healthy communities and healthy watersheds?
I'm processing.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm processing. So I hear what you're saying about healthy communities. Let me hold this close to my mouth. And healthy watershed, but that's not but. However, when we say that clean and affordable drinking water, that it's a human right, Okay, so I'm processing. I'm not an external processor. I'm sorry. I can see both sides of the argument, supporting that it be included. But I think having that statement stand on its own, and then if we want to add healthy communities and healthy watersheds, that would be appropriate. But I think having that statement on its own is powerful. And then also, I'm not good about externally processing. I'm thinking my thought is that it's a powerful statement to say that clean and affordable drinking water is a human right.
All right, thank
Yeah.
you, Lorraine, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot, so feel free to continue processing. I think based on that, Heather, let us continue to discuss the amendment that Lorraine proposed, which was simply drinking water, clean and affordable drinking water is a human right. And Heather, please kind of hold your thought about how you might want to further either add or further amend one of the, perhaps that first bullet to encompass what you were, the expansion that you were proposing. So maybe continue to think on that, but let's now continue the discussion on just the amendment that Lorraine proposed, which is clean and affordable drinking water is a human right. And let's go to Cale, Bob, Robin.
Hi there. Thank you, Karen, for giving me the space to speak. I don't think we should add the term affordable. I feel it's contradictory. I feel like if it's a human right, then money should not be something that can influence it. I also think in terms of water, drinking water, those thinking more broadly, not just for what we pay for at home, but out in the public where people like, downtown, the park where we gather, that, these people that come and participate have also have a right to access, clean water. I also think that we should expand further into, folks that are without homes, that they also have access to, clean water. And I feel like these statements shouldn't be limiting, it should be broadening, so that we look forward into how do we expand the accessibility of clean water to all people, not just the ones in the home or the ones who can pay money for it.
Thanks, Cale. Bob, why don't you go ahead next?
Yeah, I guess to me, entitled and human right, I'm supportive of the change of entitled to human right. I don't know that I would separate out the three terms, though. I think that starts to beg more questions than it answers. Healthy water is a human right, but people are also entitled to healthy watersheds and healthy communities. What's the differentiating factor there, and what does that mean, and how does that play out differently in terms of how we prioritize things? So I don't know. I don't mind the change, but I would keep the three of the terms linked.
Robin?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I agree with what Cale was saying, and that I liked eliminating the affordable aspect of that proposed addition, because if we're saying it's a human right, I think the best way to say it would be that Pub believes clean drinking water is a human right, because it allows us to be more expansive rather than obviously we want things to be affordable, but there are so many things that we're saying, oh, it's affordable, oh, you have access to it, and that is still, it's still not accessible to many people. And so if we're saying it's a human right, then the affordable should be implied, but it also allows us to expand on that notion further and possibly take that belief, put it into action in the ways that we're moving within our bylaws and what we're recommending to the bureaus and council.
And Tom, before I go to you, let me just check with Sarah, and Sarah, just make sure that your hand is raised in comment to something that's not this amendment that we're discussing right now.
It is. I do have a comment, so Tom can go first, but I do have something.
Tom and then Sarah. Okay.
So I'm in favor of that idea of removing affordable as well. Something that strikes me about what we're doing here is we're sort of playing around with nature and our own human context. So when we say clean and affordable drinking water, that's because we get the water, we make it clean, we try to make it affordable as it relates to the Portland Water Bureau. In a sense, if we were really being, I think, pure about this, we would say water is a human right without giving it any kind of definition. But we are in the context of being an organization that is associated with a city. And so using these different terms, such as clean drinking water, and I like the idea of taking affordable out, but I think I wouldn't mind if we spend a little time on that, not today, but if we worked on this without this sort of urgency to get it all figured out immediately, but to work on that statement, because I do think that is a really valuable statement. When we take the word drinking water out and we just use water, then we're talking about wastewater, stormwater, everything. And then that triggers in my mind, well, what about our respect for other species that need water? What about all the other living things in our city that need water? And how do we recognize that in our beliefs and values? And perhaps that's a statement that we also believe all living beings or entities are also entitled to their share of the water. And so when we do things that we pay attention to that, and of course we don't, usually, I mean, it starts to come out in healthy watersheds. The watershed piece is what starts bringing in other species. So at any rate, to try and get this going, I think both of these bullets, as they seem to be evolving, deserve some time by maybe a couple people that would really want to work on wordsmithing them and not try and rush it today. So that's thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And before we go to Sarah, that appreciate the concern about rushing. Certainly not trying to rush, just trying to guide. And at the same time, we do have a motion on the floor, and we are in the process of discussing. So in that sense, we do need to make a decision, at least on the motion and the amendment that have been made now, unless someone would like to table it to a future time. But I'm not suggesting that anyone do that right now, but that certainly is an option.
I have a clarifying question about process.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I wonder, I feel like we've done this in the past where we've agreed to amend a document, in the meeting and then agreed to like wordsmith it later. I don't know, this might be different. Maybe we do have to have exactly the words precisely dialed in because we have to like make a final decision in this meeting. But like, if it's possible to have like a subset of us, like 2 or 3 of us, wordsmith this and bring the final language back to the pub later, is that an option?
So that would be an option if we first resolved what's on the table right now, which is a motion, and then subsequently there was an amendment to that motion. So that, just to remind folks where we are, there was a motion to essentially readopt the statement of values. There was then an amendment to add the statement, clean and affordable drinking water is a human right, which was seconded. And so, you know, we need to somehow resolve that. And one way of resolving it would be to table the essentially the motion, and we could table it till time certain. We could table it to our next meeting. And then, yes, Julia, in the meantime, if there were a couple of volunteers that wanted to put their heads together about, I guess, the perfect wording, then yes, that could certainly happen. Sarah.
Hey everyone, Sarah Messier, ex officio member and Water Bureau staff. So I just wanted to share an observation is that the proposed statement talks about drinking water, which is related to the Water Bureau, but doesn't include BES in any way. So what I was thinking as a suggestion is including sanitation in this statement, since that is, you know, Water Bureau, we provide water going into the home. And I think, you know, one of the essential responsibilities of BES is to make sure that all the wastewater is taken out of the home. So if you all, you know, continue to move forward and wordsmith this and all that, I would love to see some reflection of BES's responsibilities included in the statement. Thank you.
Lorraine, please go ahead.
I just wanted to go back to my original intent, okay, and with my statement when I requested that if we can change it, the clean water is and I've updated it. The clean water is a human right. Specifically with, especially with the conversation that we had at our last meeting about the bureaus, Water Bureau is going to start collecting on people's arrears and all that kind of thing. So in thinking about that, especially that's what got me thinking into, oh my goodness, if people didn't have money to pay for their water bills during COVID, and now there is a backlog, how are they going to afford it, right? And then I'm thinking, okay, what it is people going to do if their water is cut off in their homes, right? What would I do if I am being empathetic? What would I do if water is cut off from my home living in the city of Portland? So it's an urban environment, right? It's not, at least in my former, my home country, my country of birth, I know where there's a well that I can go, and I'm not talking about any primitive country. It's not primitive, but there are wells, right? I can go and get water from a well to boil that water to subsidize so that I will have some form of water. And I'm thinking, if someone's home is cut off from water in the city of Portland, what are they going to do? How are they going to flush their toilets? How are they going to take baths? How are they going to prepare their meals? How are they going to keep their family clean? Then their kids are going to go to school probably with dirty clothes. They'll be in class. They'll be subject to all kinds of comments. So I start thinking about that. So this is what I'm like, oh my goodness, what is the realities to actually cutting someone's water off who lives in the city of Portland in an urban environment? Can they go down to the Willamette River and dip some water out of the river and boil it and use it? I don't think so. Can they go to the Columbia River? Do they have access to travel to these water sources? So this is where my thinking was. And that is what led me to think that it has to be a human right. And we have to figure out that as humans, as a city in how does humanity butts up to the corporate side of things, or the realities that yes, it costs money to get water to people and that sort of thing. And I think that is where my thinking is at, that in that we have moved so far away from the humanity of what it is, that and that we, yes, I understand that there's a cost to run lines and to get water to people, to clean the water and all of that. But that is where my mind was thinking. And when I tell you I'm an internal processor, that's the things that have been rolling around in my mind that led me to be like, oh my God, in some way we have to get back to the humanity of it, the reality of what would happen. What does that realistically look like? So I just wanted to put that back on the table.
All right, thanks, Lorraine, for coming back. And I do want to apologize. I may have forced a hugely expansive and consequential topic into a fairly prescriptive format. So I apologize for sort of shoehorning it into Robert's rules. So having said that, I do recommend that we reach a collective decision of where we want to go with this, how we want to handle the suggested, first of all, again, the motion that was made to readopt, and then sounds like we had some more thoughts on making some additions and putting some more thought into this. So my recommendation is that someone make a motion to table this discussion and decision until our next meeting. And if someone would choose to make that motion, then we can take a vote and decide if that is how we want to handle this. And then we could, after that, we can make another decision about, okay, well, what happens between now and the next meeting?
I make that motion.
And Amy, let me look to you and make sure procedurally and timing wise.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Problems.
Yeah, there's no requirement that it has to happen at this meeting. I mean, there was healthy discussion and there's clearly an issue on the table, and until you adopt a new version, this current version still exists. And so yeah, that it makes sense to table it. And so I think this process works. So either making that motion or Julia withdrawing the original motion to adopt, I think either option works.
I'm happy to withdraw. I feel like that seems like the elegant solution is to withdraw that motion and for us to revisit this once we've had a chance to give it the process that it needs and a little bit more finessing.
And Lorraine, with withdrawing, if Julia withdraws her motion, are you okay with that, again, since you had made an amendment to the original motion?
Yes, I would like it to be tabled.
Okay, so why don't we then, for the purpose of recording, let's just say the maker of the motion has withdrawn the motion. And I think that's all we need to say, and we will bring this topic back at a subsequent meeting. But I will say we've done a really healthy review of of the beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles. So I thank you all for your thoughts and discussion. Okay, Alexis and then Tom.
I just wanted to, I don't know if this needs like a formal proposal, but I did want to propose that a couple of us meet offline to discuss some potential language then that we could be bringing forward to the pub at our, at the appropriate time, whether that's our next meeting or a subsequent one.
Okay, hold that thought, Alexis, for a second. Let me go to Tom and then we'll come back to that.
Yes, I wanted to volunteer to be, to work on the revisions or these particular statements. That's what I wanted to share.
Okay, so let's keep in mind that if we have 3 people or more that want to get together and put heads together about wording changes, then that's a public meeting and we would need to form a subcommittee and have the appropriate notice for that deliberation to take place, which is fine. And if we have only 2 folks that want to get together with pub staff and take what they heard today and suggest some language that could be shared with the pub at the next meeting, then that can just happen at the scheduling of the convenience of the folks that want to engage. So let me ask then, how many folks would like to confer and deliberate on wording changes to the value statement? Can I see a show of hands? So I see 4 hands.
But can I ask a procedural question?
Yeah.
I don't need to, I'm interested, but mostly that I would just like to share that the UN has language that they've adopted on both of these things. And that's like all I would want to say. And so I'm happy to say that and then let others do particular wordsmithing. But the UN refers to safe and clean water and sanitation. And access to healthy environments as human rights that I think would be very helpful language to draw from on something like this that then others can bring forward. So I will lower my hand now that I have said that out loud.
Great, thank you, Heather. Appreciate
And
that.
if I could just jump in, I would like to do the same thing because I think it would be much more efficient for just 2 people to be able to easily get together without a public meeting. So I'm very interested in what Alexis just said, what that is. So maybe she can share that with the others. And I will withdraw my hand as well. And then it would be currently 2 people, and that should make it much more efficient for them to get together and work on it.
All right, great problem solving all, excellent. So Lorraine and Heather, is that the other hand that I'm seeing? Okay, so if you 2 would like to get together, I would suggest keeping Amy in the loop. Yeah, have at it and bring us some recommendations. It doesn't have to be the next meeting, but when you're good and ready, you can bring us some recommendations on changing that language. And thank you for volunteering to do that. And thanks to everybody for the discussion. Amy, any closing concerns or thoughts about that?
Nope, that sounds great.
Okay. So Heather and Lorraine. Okay, well, let's, great. Oh, Sarah, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Sarah again from the Water Bureau. So this is a response to one of Robin's initial thoughts about trainings and resources and how to educate ourselves. And I was in the same place a number of years ago, and I didn't know what to do, and was definitely really relying on people to bring things to me. And then as a white person, I realized, oh, I have to go and do the research and the education. And so I've been doing that in my own workplace, in my day job, and I'd be happy to chat with anyone, in this space that would like to set up that type of education or the sharing of articles or resources or doing podcasts. I'd be happy to share my experience to set that up, because I think that is a really powerful resource of doing collaborative learning and sharing and discussions. And especially, as a white person, it's my responsibility to do my own education about this, and not rely on other folks that have those lived experiences to have to continue to do that education over and over. So that is just my reflection. And I definitely, if there is willingness, within this group to do that type of work, I totally support it. And I'm here as a resource to help, come up with ideas of how that could happen in this space.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Julia, please go ahead.
Yeah, I have a quick follow-up to that. I'm really glad you brought that up, Sarah, because as Robin was speaking, there was this like twinge in my brain and it just didn't quite click until you spoke and you reminded me. So I work at the Oregon League of Conservation Voters, and we do a lot of equity, diversity, and inclusion work as a organization is predominantly white people and has been historically run by white people. We're trying to do a lot of that work, and we've developed kind of an onboarding packet for our volunteers and new staff hires that is, I think, a really kind of well curated, current kind of collection of really great materials that are particularly geared to help white people understand our privilege, and it also has the kind of layers in a lot of information about environmental movements, because that's our background, but I feel like it's also our background here within this group. So I'm happy to share that material with pub staff, and maybe they can share it out to the rest of the pub. We might want to, it just feels like a good starting point where folks can kind of choose to delve into it on their own time, and kind of use those materials as a starting point. And I also do agree that we probably should be working from a common understanding of definitions of terms, so that we kind of know what each other means when we say things like diversity or inclusion or any number of things. So like, and there's like a number of resources that have definitions that we could kind of collectively like decide what kind of definitions we think we want to be adopting. But I do think those are, in order to live the values within the state we've created, these are kind of probably really good next steps for us to so anyway, I'm happy to share those resources. The League of the National League of Conservation Voters has like a pretty extensive list of definitions for a lot of these terms, which is also kind of an interesting jumping off point. Again, I'm not saying we have to adopt these whole like exactly as they are, but they might be interesting starting points for us to consider. So I can share those materials with staff and we can go from there if that feels helpful.
Yes, thank you. Excellent, excellent. Please, I mean, and as other folks come across, have experiences from their work and other organizational lives, yeah, I would say, I think that would be wonderful if everyone could kind of share those resources with staff, with Amy, and we can put our collective heads together about how to act on that and how to institutionalize, or maybe that's not the right word, but let's just say act and learn and sort of live out the principles that we adopt and talk about, and say at the beginning of every meeting. So thanks all for that really thoughtful reflection on that. So if there's no further thoughts and discussion on that, let us move into our next item of business, and that is walking through the some of the changes and comments that you all have either through me or directly to Amy have suggested for our sort of back-looking annual report and our forward-looking work plan. Before Amy's going to walk through the changes that you all have suggested. And again, I don't want to instill a false sense of urgency. We don't have to adopt a final report and work plan today. We do have to adopt a work plan at our next meeting, because that gets presented, our annual report and work plan gets presented to council at the end of September. And that is a requirement in our charter and charter, yes.
In code, yeah.
And code, thank you, code, that was the word I was thinking of. So, no, don't have to make any final decisions today, but we need to get pretty darn close on what we want to adopt as a final document. So having said that, last thing I'll say is that work plan wise, this is a living document. We will revisit this throughout the year. We will adapt, we will incorporate, emerging issues and priorities as they sort of float to the top, things that we didn't necessarily expect. So this is not a rigid document. The words in the list do not have to be absolutely perfect, and we have to adhere to them rigidly for the next year. I just want to sort of frame it that way. And Amy, if I can turn the mic over to you to walk through what you have received from hub members.
Thank you, Karen. So I will just, as I mentioned in the emails and in our conversations, just work our way through the document. So please feel free to raise your hand or interject. Karen, if I'm looking at the screen and walking through the document, if somebody's raised their hand, please interject for me so that I know to stop, because otherwise I'll just move to the next section that has something highlighted, because I've just gone through and made changes to the sections of the document based on feedback that we've received. So if there's a section that we've not made changes to, but you have some feedback on, please certainly let me know. As was noted in the purple text, the final editing and wordsmithing of the document and formatting and pictures and all that stuff will be the next phase that will happen. This is getting kind of all of the key content of the report and the work plan components done. Tom.
I think in this section, this very first part where you name and you're expressing a lot of the things that we worked on, I would suggest we add the automated meter project as something that we looked at, and we actually gave recommendations about the meters to City Council as they were proposed in the budget. So it was a budget recommendation there. So I think this is where it would fit in this paragraph where you're talking about policy work. I also just want to throw out the idea that as we are describing the method that we used, as you're saying here, with one or two pub members doing certain things, I'm just not quite sure how important it is for us to describe our methodology to City Council, just in the sense of trying to reduce verbiage and stuff like that. So I would suggest that we could just delete that. I mean, it's good for us to know how we work and what we do. I'm just throwing it out there. It just raises a question. I don't know that City Council needs to know that kind of detail. So those are my thoughts at this point.
I'm sorry, delete, I missed that, Tom. Delete the
delete the reference to the one or two pub members who worked outside of the board, then brought the initial findings. In other words, it's a description of the method that was used by the board to work on some issues. And I'm just wondering if our method is important for City Council to know, or the public. This report is for City Council and the public, for them to know the methods that we used. And maybe it is. It's just my feeling that maybe it's not important to describe our methodology in this report.
Yeah, I think part of the reason it was called out in the executive summary is because later on in the report, it is called out as being an approach that the board found to be really effective in moving policy items forward. And so, that it was a more effective use of maximizing meeting time. And so I think that's why it was highlighted. The process was highlighted because it advanced policy work more effectively. So I think that's the reason it was called out.
Yeah, I'm just suggesting that I don't think we need to call it out. So that's my 2 cents about that.
Okay, let's just note that, Tom, and
Thank you.
let's go ahead and move on.
All right. Okay, so the next changes that were highlighted were some suggestions that Teresa had highlighted. This section used to say issues addressed, and as Teresa mentioned, kind of the use of the term addressed kind of implies resolution, which, a lot of these issues are ongoing issues and they aren't necessarily solved. So the suggestion was use of the term discussed. So something like discussed, or alternatives could be considered, or issues focused on, something like that. So I've tentatively put in discussed. If people felt strongly about an alternative, we could use an alternative term, but it made sense to make that change. So if people had strong feelings one way or another. The next
I'm
major.
sorry.
Yeah.
Just really quick. I like focus areas or the two that Teresa had mentioned, just because they sound a little bit more active than just discussed. So considered or focus areas or something like that. Just discussed doesn't imply as much action after it. So that's just a preference.
So focus areas is.
Or considered. I think both of those are just a little bit stronger than discussed.
Okay. Tom?
Here again, I would like to ask that we add the automated meter into this list of items. And of course, the budget. Is the budget listed on here? The budget is a big project. Okay. So, but the automated meters, I think we should keep that in there. And our rates listed here as a
Yes.
BES rate study, is that in there?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Oh yeah, it's called comprehensive
Rate study.
Yeah, I actually didn't find it to be comprehensive, but okay, great. Just the automated meters, I think, would be another. I think it's an important issue that we should not.
All right. So the next feedback was around some recommendation to make sure that there was some highlighting of city actions taken around the recommendations that go to the bureaus or council. So what I've done which is part of the focus of this section, which is the accomplishments and impacts. And so what I've done tentatively is add in a lot of times there is some existing language in some of these sections around what the city, either the bureaus or council had done. And so I've either just added in a highlighted or bolded city response, or I've added that city response and, like in this section, added a sentence to describe the specific action or response that took place. So either acceptance of the recommendation report, or, you know, engagement that's taking place, some sort of language around the engagement that's taking place. So you can see that there is some in this section. There's, I'll come back up to these other highlighted changes, but regarding, but I think this is budget analysis. So I have, you know, that the city council accepted, you know, Pub's testimony and budget letters, but did not accept all of the recommendations, and highlighted that AMI was included in the budget. There are some others where I left the language that was already in here. So here I've just added the city response, but left the existing language that was already in those paragraphs, and just added a highlight so that you can see what so it calls out what the city response is. So that's where I tried to call that out so that it would be highlighted in this section. So that's what I attempted to do to try to highlight that. Tom?
And Tom, before.
I'm sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
Oh, great.
Oh, okay.
It's
Sorry
done
about that.
before.
In this next section, there was the removal of this sentence about the budget engagement, and the addition of some specific language around the specific accomplishments. So what the deliverables were that Pub accomplished related to budget based on some recommendations. So I've highlighted what those changes are here on the screen. I'll try to make it so you can see the full between the two pages. And then, as I said, I added the city response there at the bottom in response to that other feedback. And Bob, I got your chat message. I know you sent in, it sounds like some comments probably via email just prior to the meeting. And as I was setting up for the meeting, I did not have time to integrate any of those. So if I'm going through the document and there's sections where there are comments, please feel free to raise your hand and raise those, or if they're detailed and I need to bring up the email in order to do that, I can try to do that.
Thanks. No, I appreciate that. It's sorry to get them to you late.
Yeah, no, I know you were traveling, so.
But all three of my comments were kind of forward focused. So I think.
Okay, when we get to that section.
Yeah, probably just come to at the end when you got through everything else is fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. I will keep moving. I've highlighted here just to make you aware. Again, I added, this isn't a direct response, so I use different language here because, you know, there is some city action that's taken place. It's not a response to what Pub did, but it is related because, you know, Pub was one of many voices, you know, that was making recommendations around demographic data collection. And there are actions that, you know, have subsequently been taken that did include demographic data collection. And so I did highlight that using the existing language that was in there. And then this highlighted sentence at the end is just an additional sentence that I added because additional steps have been taken since the version that was sent to you from Eliza. So I just added a sentence to highlight the stakeholder group that they've convened, because it does relate to some of the data that they've been collecting and some responsiveness that I think is relevant based on the data that they're collecting. So thought it was worth highlighting. I think then there aren't changes for a little while until we get to the forward-looking sections. There was a recommendation to remove this use of the word past regarding inequitable policies, actions, and practices. There was a suggestion that we could add an additional sentence if we wanted to add something about the legacy of racist processes and policies as well. But at a minimum, at least removing the word past. So that's what I've done initially. So if people felt strongly about adding something additional, we could. But otherwise, the rest of the section is consistent with the language that's been used in the prior year with that one change. There was this right here used to say the record heat wave of June 2021, and there was the recommendation to change or at least add increasing summer heat. I replaced that to increasing summer heat because it captures both the record heat wave of June and is forward-looking to the modeling that Alexis was referencing. So it talks more to the future climate crisis issues. This sentence here, would love feedback from folks because I could not quite get the language right. So Teresa, forgive me if I if I didn't quite capture it correctly, but there was a suggestion from Teresa to include some emphasis on maintaining or including a focus on houselessness and ensuring that the policies as they address those impacts are humanitarian for the houseless communities. And so I've attempted to incorporate that into this section. It's the section that made the most sense. It may make sense somewhere else in the document. So if people have other ideas of where it may make sense, but because there is a lot of interagency and cross-sector collaboration related to that, it connected to this piece of work. And so in talking with Karen, it seemed like this was the right place to put it. And so this is the tentative version that I created, but am open to feedback on language. And finally, there's a lot of highlights here and probably where there's most conversation for all of you. So we'll take more time on this section. This is where the bulk of the changes came to the work plan that is forward-looking. Let's see if I can try to get it so that you can see more of it on the screen. So there were a number of recommendations. There were some additions, including the input on the hiring of the BES director, The addition of accountability to the section on process coordination, communication, and mutual trust building to try to capture the need for follow-up on items such as the AMI, providing feedback loop on recommendations that are provided. Added this next step language to the AMI to highlight kind of the future follow-up that's needed on that project. Let's see. There were a number of comments related to the climate action and adaptation strategies. You can see that I've added 2 sub-bullets based on some feedback from Teresa, including the tree program next steps and urban heat. You can see some narrative off to the right there that provides a little bit of detail on that about wanting to see more about how urban heat relates to and impacts the 2 bureaus. And some of the policies of the multi-bureaus intersect with that issue. There was a comment related to I think from another member about this section and just kind of an open question to the group about any specific activities related to climate action and adaptation, that whether there are more specific subcategories to this section that could be added to get a bit more specific, since this is such a broad topic, and recognizing that the goal is for the work plan to be relatively broad, but whether there are some specific issues that are worth calling out in the work plan. So if there's any discussion around that the group wants to have. And then finally, the addition of wholesale agreements based on the direction at one of the prior pub meetings based on the public comment and feedback related to wholesale agreements and the impact on budget and rates. All right, we have a couple hands. So Tom and then Lorraine.
Thank you. This is Tom. So 2 items. One would be regarding the climate action and adaptation strategies. I don't know that we can do it now, but we earlier above said that this issue was central to the bureaus being able to help the cities reduce the city's impacts. So I think it's something that we ought to work on, but I don't know what to put in there right now. But the other thing I thought that we might want to consider is the hiring of the new BES director, and perhaps one of us being on the selection committee for that hire. I think would be something I'd like to suggest we consider as to whether we agree with that or not, and then put that forward to the Bureau or to whoever we would put it forward to. Thanks.
So Tom, may I respond to that and hear you on your idea on kind of what our input would look like? I don't think that specificity and sort of discussion about that topic is exactly sort of in order in terms of what we're putting into the work plan. But I hear you that you would like to have a conversation about what input on the hiring of the BES director might look like. But yeah, please, Lorraine, please go ahead.
Thanks, Karen. I just wanted to comment a little bit on the climate action adaptation strategies. And I don't know if it's necessary to be put, to be articulated here, but I just want us, when we're thinking about these work plans, that we holistic is such a overused word, but that's what I want to get at. In that, what are the this may sound counterproductive to what it is we're trying to achieve. But I just wanted to put out there that we need to take into consideration what does that look like and what does the impact look like for the community, right? So we need to be mindful that Eastern Portland is affordable because it's undesirable. Okay. And if we are saying, so we need to think about what does making it, again, focusing on creating an environment that we are addressing these inequities in these communities, how is that going to impact the desirability of these areas and the impact on the communities that have had to have been forced out there? And are we going to create a place now where we make these places more desirable and then it becomes unaffordable? So how are we going to take into consideration all these elements other than just that, oh my goodness, we need trees, we need to provide, we need to address these urban heat zones that are incorporating. So I wanted to be a more kind of comprehensive conversation that may take into consideration cross bureaus, inputs and impacts. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm talking about gentrification to some extent.
Bob, and then Teresa, please go ahead.
I guess this is where I'll throw my my additions into the hopper. I had three things I wanted to add to this list or contemplate adding to this list. One was to expand green infrastructure, trees to green infrastructure in general. I think we tend to get high centered on trees, but BES in particular employs a lot of different strategies to deal with things like climate and climate justice. I think of green streets, green roofs, protection of natural areas and trees. So there's a lot of different avenues that all kind of fit together. So I would suggest expanding that out. Number two is the Cities Endangered Species Program, which is housed at BES, but also has implications for the Water Bureau as well. That program has gotten moved around and absorbed and reabsorbed throughout the Bureau over the years, to the point where it's actually hard to find right now. But the city historically has had a huge commitment to salmon recovery in particular, and that's something that's of interest to a lot of groups, but in particular the tribes. And so I think it'll be interesting to hear where that now lives and what the city's ongoing commitment is to listed species. And then the last was just budgetary. I would be really interested in potentially having us get a better understanding of budgetary trends across the board, which things are going up and which things are going down over time, which programs are have higher levels of staffing, which ones have lower levels of staffing. And particularly in the context of the reorg, it's very hard now to track, how the Bureau is evolving and where programs that historically were fairly easy to identify, where they now stand. And so I think it would be interesting in terms of the budget process to really dig down pretty deeply on that and see where those positions and funding buckets have evolved to. That's all.
Teresa and then Julia, and I do want to just time check with everyone. We're at 12:30, and I do know that at least one person has a meeting at 12:30 and needs to leave. So, we're still at quorum and we can continue deliberation, but let's try and wrap up in, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes or so people can get some lunch.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I'll make it quick. I just want to respond to Lorraine's comments about, adding trees into areas that are considered undesirable in the tree on the tree program topic. I think, I totally agree that, sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of times there can be green gentrification happening, but also like people who live in those areas deserve trees too. Like I've been interacting with a lot of community members, especially from the BIPOC community, and they've all just, expressed their desires to live in a greener community too. And they all want, like, not all of them, but like a lot of who we are interacting with, a lot of them just want, say, they want trees too. And that's not something that, just because of the concern for green gentrification, meaning that, we shouldn't be, making that accessible to them. So there are, I think, yeah, the nuances in the tree program is that there needs to be ways that mitigate green gentrification, whether that's through public-private partnership or other ways. It's just that, like just because there is a concern for gentrification, therefore they should all live in heat, should not be the way going forward. Also, I put like tree program, I think not just like, trees, like, of course, like I only put tree program in there because of the recent issue between Friends of Trees and the tree program at BES. But of course, like, there are other programs like the re-veg program under BES that should all be considered part of the climate. It's just that the tree program recently went through a lot of bureaucracy issues. That's why I wanted to discuss more about, what happens after that. Yeah.
Thanks, Teresa. Let's go to Julia and then Lorraine.
I will try to keep this quick. I just kind of wanted to second Bob's ideas on the budget. I don't know if this is the right place to track it, but I do feel like we're kind of, I don't know that we've collectively kind of figured out the best way for us to go a little deeper on the budget and get information in a format that tells a better and more comprehensive story about the issues that we as a pub are trying to actually track and hold the agencies accountable to. So I think there'll be a future conversation. I'm looking forward to diving into that with everybody. But I just wanted to flag that I agree with Bob, whether or not it's captured in this document or not, that's something that I'm very interested in us digging in on, having just a more comprehensive and deeper dive into the budget in a way that respects the limitations of our time, right? We are a volunteer commission. So anyway, I wanted to flag my support about the things that you said generally. And in regards to the gentrification concerns, I feel like this is a complicated one. And I think at the very least, our recommendations need to include anti-gentrification values language. And it would be good, I think, if the pub staff maybe could help make sure that we're aware of any resolutions or rules or policies that apply to these agencies or to the city at large about anti-gentrification, because I know that there's a lot of different areas where they at least are trying to be cognizant of the fact that gentrification is an issue and are trying to instill into their policies. I don't know how good the city is at following those, you know what I mean? But it's just like, I think it'd be good for us to be aware of like what's already on the books for anti-gentrification. Is the city following those things? Can we be referencing that as we're making recommendations? So, because I do know that the city is aware of that as an issue. I think there are some policies possibly, and we should probably just be aware of how they might or might not overlap with the agencies that we're overseeing.
Okay, Lorraine, you lowered your hand. Does that mean you're?
No, I just lowered. I'm
Okay,
following,
yes, please go ahead.
I'm
then.
following the rules, so I just wanted to to just reiterate, if my explanation came over as awkward, my intent was not to suggest that we leave these areas in tree desert. That is not my intent. I think I mentioned in my when I was stating it, that we need to be comprehensive in how we approach it, because we have seen what has happened. So there needs to be, yes, we need to have address urban heat and to provide coverage and all these different things. But now that we know what can happen when that happens, that we be comprehensive in any recommendations, having seen what has occurred in the past in these areas. By no means am I suggesting that there should be no trees. So I just wanted to clarify that statement.
Thank you, Lorraine. And Tom, final comment.
I just wanted to suggest to all the new members and those old members of us regarding the tree issue. Remember, we had a presentation by BES several months ago, and the basic statement that they made, or one of them, was that Parks and Forestry was going to take care of the street trees, and BES was going to promote planting trees on private property. Previous to this, BES was helping to pay for and plant and work on trees in the right of way, but it appears there was a rift between, I don't know if it was between the two directors of these two bureaus or what it was. The BES didn't get into that kind of thing. They just basically said that this is the new way of looking at things. So technically, as it relates to BES or Water Bureau, neither one of them is engaged in planting street trees unless they're required by code at certain times when they're doing something. So I think this is something for us to really look at, talk about, and decide how we might make a recommendation if we feel that that BES should be brought back into and engaged in this in a more proactive way to help address these various issues that are coming up right now. And currently, we don't actually have our pulse on the issue because it's out of our hands, because it's out of BES's hands. So I think we should bring it back. So I hope we can talk about that. And again, if you have a chance, look at that previous pub meeting where we had the presentation, or maybe Amy could actually send the presentation to everybody so they can see where BES said they were at that time. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you all for those additions, clarifications, discussion. That was fantastic. So I am going to suggest, Amy, looking to you to see if this sounds like a good plan, that if Amy, pub staff, can clean up this document, incorporating everything that's which Amy does beautifully, by the way. Thank you, Amy, for taking all these words and then pulling them together into a really nice document. But suggest that Amy kind of clean up everything, send back out a proposed final report and work plan for your read ahead before our next meeting, September 6th, I believe, and that we will hopefully be in a position on September 6th to be able to adopt the report and work plan. Does that sound like a good plan, Amy?
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay.
And I'll add on for September 6th that depending on whether the values is ready to come back, we'll either put that on September 6th or September 15th, depending on, whether when it's available, and then we'll adjust agendas based on when that is ready as well. And yeah.
Great. Yep, that sounds good. And again, no pressure on that value statement for the folks that are going to be working on that. I mean, if y'all have a chance to get together and have something to bring to us September 6th or 15th, that's great. But no pressure to necessarily have to have it done then. So also flagging for September that our meetings, first Tuesday and third Thursday actually happen on back-to-back weeks, September 6th and September 15th. So just note that for your September calendars. And that in addition to the items that Amy just referenced, we could also have, time permitting, an update from Bureau of Environmental Services on the treatment plant, secondary treatment plant upgrade project process. That might be a good good time for an update, and maybe we would also have time for a bit of reflections on our tour that we got that we didn't have time to get to today. So we'll see how that works out. But with that, any closing concerns or comments for the good of the order? Otherwise, we will adjourn.